President-elect Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. But unlike most convicted felons, Trump doesn't have to go to jail or pay a fine or do community service. Judge Juan Merchan gave Trump an unconditional discharge, meaning Trump will still be able to vote, but he cannot own a gun, and he will still have to submit a DNA sample to the New York State crime database. And despite all of the incoming president's efforts to stop the sentencing and his vow to appeal it, the stain of the words convicted felon, for now, remains attached to the name Donald J. Trump. Joining me now is Christy Greenberg, a former federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and Andrea Bernstein, journalist who covers Trump legal matters for NPR. Both were in the courtroom today, and I am eager to get the front row view of what happened, Andrea. What was it like to be in there, and what can you tell me about the mood?
I mean, it was sort of like it's always been. There was a lot of reporters, there was a lot of prosecutors, but on the defense side, there was a single Trump lawyer, bound to be a top official in the Justice Department, and then via video link, Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, who was going to be the number 2 person in the Justice Department. And it was not like any sentencing in a white-collar case I've ever been to, because normally there's a plea for leniency. The lawyers say, look, we have 800 letters showing what a great character this person is. The defendant says, I'm so sorry. None of that
happened.
Trump was defiant and did the same things he's been doing, trashed the prosecutor, trashed the process that got him there, and then got this unconditional discharge. That said, he did not want this sentencing to happen. Clearly, he went all this way to the Supreme Court to block it, and is not happy that he goes into the White House with this designation and these 34 felony convictions.
His reaction in court today, we have some audio that I'd like to play, was definitely giving unhappy. Let's take a listen.
It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. The fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before.
That's not typically the behavior of someone who's just lost the case in court and is going to his sentencing, right, Christy? I mean, just as a refresher, that's unusual.
No, generally, as Andrea said, you see a defendant who comes in and you learn something new. Maybe there's some remorse or acceptance of responsibility, some rehabilitation, compassion for the people in their lives. You learn something about good that they've done, and that none of that was there. I think he violated the gag order, is one thing. He specified one of the prosecutors on Alvin Bragg's team and singled him out specifically and said, you know, this is the guy from DOJ, and then he went to the, you know, he was at the New York AG's office, and this is the guy that they got to make a move on me, and that's prohibited under the gag order. You're allowed to criticize Alvin Bragg, not members of his team. He also attacked Alvin Bragg for, just as you said, he was just trying to get me to lose the election. And then, you know, he sounds like a broken record. It's this whole, like, I was treated so unfairly, I'm a professional victim, and then he looked kind of on the screen like he looked bored at times, like he wasn't engaged. This is your own sentencing. And then he's just kind of rambling about people he didn't identify, about, you know, things he's heard and people, you know, things he's read, but like not really identifying what it is. And then he starts praising the conservative legal pundits on Fox. He's virtually heard of nobody who thought that the case should have been brought. Clearly, he doesn't watch a lot of MSNBC. And it's just, you know, it was kind of this rambling, unhinged thing. And he reminded me of the crazy defendant that you see at a sentencing who's going to go to jail, not the person who's going to be the next president of the United States. I mean, it was unsettling. And to know that this is the person getting leniency when none of the things that he exhibited at that sentencing would lead you to that result, other than the fact that he's going to be occupying the highest office of the land. Yeah, it's disconcerting. It makes people really question. I mean, you really can't say no one is above the law now. Today showed that Donald Trump is, in fact, above the law, at least the criminal law.
Well, and yet he, as you point out, he really didn't want this day to happen. As insignificant as the punishment is, he didn't want it to happen. Michael Cohen, who served time for this crime, right, was on with my friend Chris Hayes earlier at 8 p.m. And he brought, I actually want to just play some sound from that interview because he makes a pretty strong argument. Well, let Michael Cohen say it in his own words. Let's take a listen.
I hate to say this, I agree with Todd Blanche and I agree with Donald Trump in this. If there's no accountability and there's no deterrence factor because there is no repercussion for the 34 criminal counts, I don't see the point in having the conviction. They probably could have and should have just dismissed the case.
What do you think of that, Andrea?
I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, please.
So,
speak.
because first of all, I do think it's meaningful to have this felony conviction. It would have been worse if it was sort of frozen in amber and unsettled forever, which is sort of what the alternative seemed until last night was going to be. But this courtroom, the testimony unveiled before us truths that we never knew about Donald Trump's White House, a little bit, about his business, a lot, about the way that he won the 2016 election. All of this testimony, all that we learned, that has value, setting things down on the record. And I think we're increasingly going into a period where I think it's pretty clear that we are not going to be able to rely on legal institutions to bring about justice as we've understood it, but we have this important tool of truth telling. And I do think a lot of truth came out in this trial.